Okay, so this is our section 2. This is fractions. This is just some of the very basics, really stuff from primary school. A fraction tells us how much of a quantity is represented. For example, 1/2 of 50 pounds is 25 pounds. 1/5 of 50 pounds is 10 pounds. If I look at this here, in the shape 3/8 of the circle is shaded, i.e. the shape is split into 8 equal parts, and 3 of them are shaded. If I look at this, 1/3 of this is shaded. The same amount, but it's written as 2/6 here, is shaded, and 4/12 is shaded. In this diagram, the same amount of each rectangle is shaded, although the rectangle has been split into a different number of equal parts. This tells us that 1/3 equals 2/6 equals 4/12. These are called equivalent fractions. In each case, the numerator, which is the top number, and the denominator, the bottom number, are in the same ratio. Fill in the missing number to make equivalent fractions. So here we have a quarter, and with 12, what do we times it 4 by to give us 12? We times it by 3, so we have to times the top then by 3 as well. This one here, we're given the two numerators. 4 to 16, so we've got to times by 4. That means we times this then by 4 as well. 5 into 9 is a bit of a messy one. I'm going to change it into something else. So we kind of go for 5 over 9 equals, let's just go nice and straightforward to make it 15. And we would times this then by 3. And we times this by 3 as well. And we would end up then with 27. You can do this one, you can do two operations. So you divide by 5 and multiply by 9. Divide by 5 and multiply by 9, which would give us 81 over 5, which is what's 16 1/5 or something like that. You can't do a fraction within a fraction, so that one wouldn't quite work out. When we simplify fractions, we find equivalent fractions which are written with the lowest possible number in them, while still showing the same amount. If I have to simplify 4/12, so I can divide the numerator and denominator by 2, that gives me 2/6. You would have done there, divided this by 2, divide this by 2, give me 2/6. Then divide by 2 again to get 1/3. This fraction is now simplified because it can't divide top and bottom by any other number. So 1/3 is this fraction then in its simplest form. So our example 2 then is just to simplify some of these fractions. Let's take a wee look. Our first one is 12 over 60. I can see, I mean, if you can't see what it divides by, just you can hopefully see it divides by 2, but I can see this one divides by 6. So I'm going to divide this by 6, divide this by 6. If I divide this by 6, I get 2, divide this by 6, then I get 10. This now divides by 2, which would give me then 1/5. Now, if I was more eagle-eyed, I would have spotted that this actually divides by 12 and I could have done it all in one move, but that's all totally fine. The 55 over 99 one, let's remove it over here a wee bit. I think most people spot what this one divides by. It divides by 11. And this one divides by 11 as well. And that gives us then 5/9. That's our part B. Part C then 108 over 44. Slightly tougher one. Sorry, 108 over 144. Hard to see. I guess we could just start dividing by 2 and see what we end up with. So let's divide by 2. And divide by 2. That gives me 54. And that gives me 72. Divide by 2 again. If I divide this by 2, I get 27. I divide this by 2, I get 36. Again, 27 and 36 are numbers I recognize. I can say I divide both by 9. And that gives me then 3 over 4. So this was effectively then 3/4. Next we bit then changing fractions to decimals. You should be able to express fractions with a denominator of 10 or 100 as decimals. To change 37.51 to a fraction, we consider the 37 is a whole number, 5 is the tenths column, and 1 is the hundredths column. This means that 0.51 is 51 over 100, 37.51 is 37 and 51 over 100. In the same way, 7 tenths is 0.7, 47 over 100 is 0.47. Express 37 over 100 as a decimal. That's just going to give us then 0.47. 0.37. A wee bit then on percentages. You should be able to describe a shaded section of a shape using percentages and convert between fractions, decimal, and percentages. The word percent means per hundred, from the Latin cent, meaning 100. So 40% is 40 out of 100, and that's 0.4, or 4 over 100 is the same as 4/10, which is the same as 2/5. Write 65% as a fraction and as a decimal. So 65% equals 65 over 100. That divides top and bottom by 5. And that gives me then 13 over 20. So then we'll be at part 1. Part 2, as a decimal, is simply going to be then 0.65. It's 65 over 100. I hope we can see then where that comes from. Next one then, write 3 over 20 as a percentage or as a decimal. There's a load of different ways of doing this one, but I think probably one of the easiest is to change this into 100. So we're going to times it up by 5. If you times top and bottom of this by 5, you will get 15, and you'll get 100. Now it's just like the one above, so that's going to be 15%, and then that's going to be 0.15. On to our next bit then, fractions or percentages of amounts. Find 4/9 of 72 kilograms. I would always tend to go for 1/9 equals 72 divided by 9, which is going to be 8 kilograms. Therefore 7/9 is 8 times 7, which is 56 kilograms. 18% of 500, loads of different ways again of doing this one. I would go for 1% is equal to 5 pounds. So 18% equals then 5 times 18. 18 times 5, just in case we don't know it, is 90. So 18% then is going to be 90 pounds. Comparing fraction sizes, you should be able to put fractions in order by finding common denominators. Arrange the following fractions in ascending order. So this is 3/5, 7/20, 1/2, and 4/10. We want to find the common denominator, so let's rewrite these in terms of common denominators. So 3/5 we want to change into 20ths. I'm timesing this by 4, so I'm going to times this by 4, so that's 12/20. 7/20, that's already fine. 1/2 I want to change into 20ths. Times by 10, so that times by 10. And then the final one then, 4/10, change it into 20ths. I times it by 2, so I times by 2. Let's just write this for some reason. It makes me feel a bit better that you can kind of see which ones are which ones. So in ascending order, so we can do the smallest one first. The smallest one here is 7/20. The next smallest one is 8/20, which is our 4/10. The next smallest one is 10/20, which is 1/2. And the next one then is 3/5. And so that's in then in ascending order. Example 2 then, which is larger, 7/12 or 5/8? Again, we want a common denominator. You could do 12 times 8 and put it in 96, but there's definitely a lower common denominator than that. And if you check and see, they both go into 24. So if we choose them both into 24, what do I times this by? Times it by 2, so it's going to be 14. And then 5/8, 24. 8 times 3 gives me 24, so I times by 3 here, and I get 15. So 5/8 is larger. Arrange the following decimals in descending order. This should be okay. So for 0.52, 0.67, 0.485, 0.5, 0.671. So I have two here that are 0.6s. This is going to be a bigger number than this one. So 0.671 and then 0.67. We've dealt with those two. I then have 2 in the 0.5 category, so that's 0.52 and that's 0.5, so 0.52 is bigger. And then 0.5. And I'm only left with 1 then, and that's 0.485. I think that's going to be